right, my name is Tamon Hamlet. I am the creator of Retake the House GOP, and I am now kickstarting my first ever live stream interview, a series I hope to do where I interview exciting candidates all across the nation as we head to the election. Um, Today we're going to cover Miss Donyale Hall, who should be joining us any second now. So we'll just wait here a couple of seconds. So for those who want to know, I currently reside in Houston, Texas. I am a sophomore at University of Houston. I'm originally from Delaware. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware for 18 years. So now I am here in University of Houston. I dedicated my life to my extracurricular time to politics, and when you're running this account like I run, where I follow GOP races across the state, you run into.
Hey, I see you. Can you
Hey,
hear
there we
me?
go. There we go. Yes, I can hear you. Okay. It takes a while to load. So thank you
It
so
does.
much. Oh, go on. Sorry. Uh,
No, no,
well,
no. I was just saying, thanks for having me. I know it took a minute for it to load, so I'm
yeah.
here.
Well, thank you so much. This is my first ever time trying to do an interview over Instagram Live, so we're just going to see how it goes. And yeah, the next 2 weeks, I just hope to interview as many people as possible. I was just saying, when you run an account like this, I track GOP races all across the nation, and you run into very exciting people when you follow races all across the nation. So,
True.
uh,
I was looking on your page and I was seeing all the thumbnails on there of all the different candidates. So,
yes, yes. 400, 535, 435 houses and 100 Senate seats,
wow.
Well, so let's start off with introducing you to the audience. What race are you running in, and where are you from?
Well, I'm definitely not running at the national level. I'm running for a local seat here, but I aimed high for the second highest office in the state of Delaware for lieutenant governor this year. So, we've been out on the campaign trail for a lot of months, and COVID has not been friendly, but we persevered and pressed our way through, and it looks good here for us. So. I'm excited for the journey, and either which way, it's a win because we've changed a lot of hearts and minds about conservative values here in the state of Delaware, and people are open and responsive. So we've set the pace for cycles to come. So this is the first year of hopefully a mission to at least move the state purple, if not red. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I understand. So, for those who don't know, I'm actually from Delaware. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and I lived there for a couple years before my family moved to Wilmington, Delaware. I lived there for about 18 years, and I recently moved to Newark a couple years back, and now I'm in Houston, Texas. I go to University of Houston. So I was very excited to find a candidate like you, since Delaware has very close roots to me. I've told everyone about you, and let's talk about Delaware politics. So, as you said, Delaware is a leaning blue state. In order to win an election, you're probably going to have to capture some people from the other side of the aisle. Could you care to talk of how you plan on capturing the moderate or independent base that we find Delaware tends to be very independent leaning?
That's absolutely correct. And so I'll give a little bit of my background. I'm
Oh,
not a
definitely,
native
definitely. Let's
Delaware.
start with that.
Okay.
Why don't we
That
start? Yeah.
it kind of speaks to how I was able to tap into the soft Democrat. Even some of the harder leaning Democrats have even been persuadable. and definitely the independence. Well, as a 3-year-old, I moved to Delaware with my dad and my mom. My dad was stationed at Dover Air Force Base in 1973. I grew up here, absent a few years here and there. We lived overseas for a few years, came back. I graduated from a local high school here in 1987. I went to UD for a couple of years. I had my first child my junior year of college, so I had a speed bump of sorts, and I decided to go in the Air Force myself. At that time, in the early 90s, there was a great prevalence of commercials that said, come on in, get an education on Uncle Sam. So I decided to take him up on his offer. A paycheck, benefits, and then the ability to go back to school. That was a win-win for me. So I went in during Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, broke out probably about 2 weeks before I shipped to basic training. So my tech school was kind of long. I did that in Biloxi, Mississippi, and I served out the term of my enlistment in Charleston Air Force Base. So in 97, I made my way back to Delaware soil, and that's where I have been for the duration. So I've raised my children here, and there are a plethora of them. There are 10. 6 of them are adults and moving forward in their lives like you, Tamon, and they have emancipated themselves from my wallet. I have 2 that are serving in the Air Force, making 3 generations of Air Force legacy in my family. I have 4 full-timers in the house that are doing the remote learning thing. Yikes, can I tell you? Trying to figure out
I understand. It's terrible. I
It
have a
is.
baby brother, and my mom is she has to homeschool him pretty much because, they just don't understand how to do it virtually, especially when it first started. So I hear you. It's rough.
It's amazing. And being that you're from Delaware, I know you understand that we have rural areas in this state that still don't have broadband connections. So, those students, it's heartbreaking just to think about the fact that in Delaware, we spend so much per child and we achieve so low for those dollars in our education system, and that the achievement gap is just growing wider during a time where, digital and technical disparities are making that even a wider margin. So, I'm doing that. The 4 remote learners in my house, and then, I'm a small business owner, so I have a general contracting company, and so that's not been easy with the shutdowns, the prolonged shutdowns here in Delaware. We're still in phase 2 of our reopening strategy, and we've been essentially held hostage in this state with the executive overreach of our governor's office. So I have a huge axe to grind as a small business owner. 37% of our businesses have permanently closed their doors during this pandemic. So we were already struggling with our economy here. COVID certainly exposed all of those economic weaknesses. And I think that to your question to begin with, all these different things really kind of have positioned me well to be able to speak to the general voting population here in the state of Delaware, and even some of the people who have typically always voted straight ticket Democrat have been compelled to do something different because our leadership here has failed us epically. So that I was a lifelong Democrat. I was a Democrat for 30 years, and I did a walk-away video recently explaining how the party walked away from me long before I walked away from it. We have things that just don't represent our values here in the state of Delaware as Democrats. As a private citizen, as you can tell, I'm articulate. I've had no problem speaking truth to power, and I've aired my concerns as a private citizen to our elected officials who have done absolutely nothing to move the needle for us here. So as a person that has felt that I have freely given my vote away for 3 decades and gotten little in return for it, I decided that I would tilt my hat in the race and run on a platform that spoke to uplifting people so that all may prosper. And that message has just resonated with voters all across the state. I'm proud to say that I have received the independent party's endorsement. That's a 63,000 voter block. That substantially cuts into the persuadable universe that, will allow us to be victorious this cycle. And because there are so many disenfranchised Democrat voters, they are coming out in record numbers. I can't tell you how heartwarming it's been for people to be screenshotting their ballots, and they've said, I've never voted Republican in my whole life, but I'm voting Republican this cycle, and they're excited about the fact that we have well-rounded candidates that are willing to be champions for the people and not this party affiliation drama that we see driving rhetoric and so many other places that it keeps people distracted, and they don't have the ability to focus on the issues because of the distraction. So, with people like me, I don't allow that to be a part of the campaign. When I've had opportunities to share a virtual stage, if you will, with my opponent, you can see that there just hasn't been a track record of doing anything that moves the needle for Delawareans, and people are hungry for change. So that's how we overcome the registration difference here in the state of Delaware.
That's awesome. That's great. No, I think another thing is, we have open dialogue. I think people are so caught up with party affiliation and just talking to the echo chamber that we don't have an open dialogue with people. So when I went home to Delaware to visit my family, I told them about you and your amazing backstory and your involvement with our community. And they said, all right, we'll consider looking into her. And I said, all right, that's great. For the first time ever in their lives, they were considering voting for a Republican. Wait a couple months, I came back and I said, all right, so you guys did your homework. What do you think? For the first time ever, they put a political yard sign in their yard, and it was your yard sign. So
that's awesome. Please pass along my thanks.
I certainly do. I certainly do. Let's talk about Delaware issues. As a resident of Delaware, what are some of the most apparent issues that compelled you to run? What are some issues that face us that our elected officials don't really represent us on? And if elected, how do you plan on tackling them?
So I'm glad you asked that question. I have 3 key areas that I'm focusing on with my platform. And again, these are issues that have common concerns across the state of Delaware and really transcend party lines. As people who are out working and contributing to the tax base, you quickly understand that the economics here in the state of Delaware are such that we pay an enormous amount of income taxes as Delawareans. So, of course, everybody is going to want to get the best bang for their buck. So I have a master's degree in business with a concentration in finance, and I'm completely a numbers girl, and the numbers don't lie. So when we take a look at the numbers, if we're able to see them, that's one of the biggest issues that I have, is that we don't have transparency with our spending. So when you start looking at how the state drives revenue, that's one thing. And I don't think that we have a revenue problem here. I think we have a spending problem. So when you go to see, where those dollars are being spent, as a numbers girl, I want to see efficacy for those dollars. I want to see, some measurable outcomes. I want there to be some metrics. I want there to be a time frame to say whether or not a program is working or not to the benefit of the end recipient. And if we haven't achieved some kind of measurable outcomes that support keeping that program in place, we either need to tweak it or get rid of it altogether. Here in Delaware, I find that we throw good money after bad, and I'm quite frankly disgusted with it. As a person who's had some personal struggles and tragedies and hardships to overcome, I've been through a couple of bad marriages. I've been a single mom for a little while, done the public housing thing for a while. So I've seen where the pitfalls and shortcomings and the trappings are that are associated with a lot of the programmatic thrust that we have here in Delaware. And it's not serving the people. it's being counterproductive, and it's actually trapping people in poverty here. If you make a dollar over a threshold as a Medicaid recipient, you lose your Medicaid. So it incentivizes people to stay stuck in poverty and keep them trapped on public assistance. So I'd like to see us do some things that do means testing and operate in a programmatic way, like food stamps or public housing, where it's income driven on a sliding scale. And, that way we can help people move from complete dependency to self-sufficiency. And that has to be the goal. I'm a firm believer in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It talks a lot about first things first, taking care of the physiological needs like food, shelter, and all of that, to be able to set people up for a successful actualization to self-sufficiency. So, when we model things that way, we can't help but to have a pathway forward that creates opportunity for people. And that brings me on to the second piece of my platform, which is education. Education is key and fundamental to being able to set individuals like yourself, young people, on a track to success. I find that being educated here myself in the public education system and having 6 children graduate from the public education system, that we have moved away from some of the things that were values in my educational process to a laser-focused college pathway for all students. Well, I know a lot of students that don't want to go to college. I know a lot of students that have went to college and received degrees that weren't marketable, and yet they've amassed a huge amount of college debt that they can't leverage in the state of Delaware because we don't have quality jobs here that people can make a livable wage from. So, you compound a problem that's already in existence by pushing out yet another generation after generation of people who don't have career college-ready high school diplomas. I mean, the statistic here is that 40% of our young people come out of high school not career college-ready and not even on reading level. So when they go to college, they're having to take remedial coursework to even take their college-level coursework. That's a really sad state of affairs, especially in a state where we pay more per child than most states do across the country, and we're achieving among the lowest across the nation. So, there's something wrong with that formula. We need to make sure that we bring pathways to the trades as a part of our education system here. There's just a few limited vocational schools, and there's no clear definable pathways to certification to the trades across the entire state. There are a few schools that have exceptions, but it needs to be the norm and not the exception here. So I'm dedicated to doing things that will reform our education system in a way that we will have a success rate that creates people who are career and college ready when they finish the K through 12 experience. The last little bit of my platform speaks to the small business community and access to resources. As a small business owner, I've seen firsthand the rigors and how difficult it can be to start or grow a business in the state of Delaware. That process should never be that difficult. I mean, we live in a technological age, so everybody pretty much walks around with, a computer in their hands in the form of their smartphones, and you should be able to go to your Google search engine or whatever platform you use and say, I want to start or grow a business in the state of Delaware, and there should be one central location in the state of Delaware IT program that has all of those resources that are available. I think one of the most frustrating things is that we have hundreds of services that are put in place to help people that are in the small business realm, but the misinformation is terrible. So you could go to 2 or 3 different places and get, 2 or 3 different strategies on how to do anything here. So, just being able to create access to resources across the state in a multitude of different ways is key and fundamental to giving people the things and the tools that they need as hand-ups and not handouts. And I think that that's what people are genuinely looking for. Most people will tell you, I hate being stuck where I am, but I have no path that I can take that doesn't leave me in a bind. And so, if we have people who have lived that experience and can speak from firsthand knowledge about these things, there's another thing in Delaware that I absolutely hate is that we have these focus groups and we talk a thing to death and we have no action plan to move forward and nothing ever gets done, Tamon. It's sickening here. So, I'm tired. I know most people here are tired and frustrated with what we've had here for decades under a one-party leadership. If you don't have checks and balances, there's that old adage, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's exactly what has happened here. There's been no checks and no balances for a long time. There's been nobody that has been articulate enough to be able to speak truth to power. As you can tell, I have a passion and I have the vocabulary and the skills to be able to say some things and back it up and get some things done. So, that's how I feel that with my race in particular, we're able to change hearts and minds about voting our values and not our party affiliations here.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, I completely agree with you. My grandmother owns a restaurant down in Baltimore, Maryland. And COVID has hit us so hard. My grandmother is 65 years old, and because Congress hasn't passed any aid and the state of Baltimore is trying to keep restaurants closed, she has to go into her retirement funds just to keep the restaurant afloat. And she told me if if Congress doesn't pass any aid or if Baltimore doesn't open our restaurants, they might have to close it down permanently. And it's a very, very scary thought. Our rich politicians will never have to deal with something serious this. So we're running up on time. I wanted to ask you one final question. You mentioned before how you were a Democrat in the past, and now you're a Republican. And I always found these stories very, very interesting. I think with a candidate like Joe Biden, a lot of people are not enthusiastic about him. And maybe you'll have some people who are kind of in the middle. In 2016, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, but when Hillary Clinton won, I couldn't see how I could support someone like Hillary Clinton. So I listened to Republicans such as Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, Ben Carson, all of them, and just listening to them and the debates and their arguments, it pushed me more forward to become a Republican. So I wanted to ask you, can you tell a little more about your story of how you became a Republican today?
Well, the long and short of it is somebody asked me a very interesting question. Why are you a Democrat? I said, well, when I became a voting age, my parents were Democrats, so I affiliated that way. And that's a very common thread in a response for people and why they are affiliated the way they are, because that's just been tradition in their family and no other reason. And so that individual further challenged me and gave me a political inventory of my views and my ideologies. And he handed me the test back and said, congratulations, you're a Republican. My mouth hit the floor. What do you mean? So me being me, I didn't accept that as gospel. So I had to go and have a couple more of those kinds of tests. I found them online, and every last one of them had me as a right-leaning centrist. So I knew that my fiscal conservative values leaned me left. I try to explain this in a form where people can kind of gravitate to it. If you think about the swing of a pendulum, it's only at its extreme left or right for the shortest amount of time. And if you think about people and their political ideologies, most of us fall somewhere in the center of the swing. So I think that is something that's widely appealing to the voters, is that I'm willing to make sure their dollars holler. Who doesn't want to make sure they get the best bang for their buck? And that I'm reasonable enough to be able to sit with an open mind and have conversations about the things that matter. Public service is about representing the people, not your own interest or your party's interest. It's about doing what's right in the best interest of the people. So that long and short is why I am a Republican today.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If you're in Delaware, please consider supporting Donyale Hall. You can go to our website and learn more about her. Volunteer if you're in the area. And thank you so much for joining me for my first ever interview. And
Thank you.
I wish
It
you the
was an
best of luck
amazing
for November.
experience, and you do it well, so keep doing it.
I definitely will. You know? Well, thank you so much, and I'll
Thank
let you go. Have a wonderful night.
you. Good evening. Bye.
All right. So that was my first ever interview, and I hope I can continue to more. If you have anyone you want me to invite on, send me a DM, and I will try to contact them. Again, that was Donyale Hall. She's running for the Lieutenant Governorship of Delaware. And if you're in the area, please vote for her, please support her, donate, volunteer, all down the line. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in. I hope to do these more. Tomorrow I will be doing an interview at 9:30 Central Standard Time. So tune in for that. All right, see y'all.